Vivekachudamani, verse 92. The ears, skin, eyes, nose and tongue are organs of knowledge, for they help us to gain knowledge of objects. The organs of speech, hand, legs and the anus and the genital organ are the organs of actions, since they have a tendency for work. Here, Shankara undertakes to enumerate the different faculties of our personality that together constitute the subtle body. These faculties, in their aggregate, express through the gross body and establish the individual's contact with the world of objects around, from where he gains his own experiences of the world. The teacher points out the 5 organs of knowledge, jnana indriyas, and the 5 organs of action, karma indriyas. To perceive the stimuli reaching us and to respond to them together constitute the expression of life through us. In this verse, the word buddhi must be carefully noted. Here, buddhi does not mean just intellect. Buddhi means jnanam. Buddhīndriyāṇi means jnana-indriyāṇi, and they are 5: śravaṇaṃ, tvagakṣi, ghrāṇaṃ and jivhā. About these 5, Shankara says viṣayāvabodhanāt, because they reveal the sense objects. They help us know the sense objects, and therefore they are called organs of knowledge. They help us in receiving stimuli from the world. In the second half of the verse, the karma indriyas are enumerated. They are vākpāṇipādā, gudam and upastha. Vak, the organ of speech; pani, hands; pada, legs; gudam, organs of excretion; and upastha, the organs of reproduction. We move on to verse 93 and 94 together. The translation of these 2 verses goes like this. The inner organs are called according to their functions as mind, intellect, ego and chitta. Mind from its doubts and hesitations. Intellect from its function of determining the truth of things. The ego in its identification with both of these, and chitta from its function of constantly illumining the things of its interest. After the description of the instruments of perception and action in the verse 92, it is logical to proceed to the subtler factors that constitute the inner equipment, anta-karana. It is evident that the eyes do not see by themselves. The eyes are the instruments of seeing for the inner person. The inner equipment has different names, but they indicate only functional differences. In fact, one and the same mental stuff, the inner equipment, has different functions and so different names. Of course, they are all constituted of thoughts only. The buddhi and ahaṃkara, intellect and ego, these two form a pair. The intellect is where the I thought is created. The pure consciousness strikes first in the intellect, and the ego is the reflection that is produced. We dealt with this in the Drik-Drishya Viveka session elaborately. The self, as it were, appoints the ego as its manager to run the body. Instead of acting on behalf of the self, the ahaṃkara most often takes over the function as its own due to ignorance, delusion, and impurity in the inner equipment. So here the self is the owner of an organization. The ego is the manager of the organization. The manager here forgets that he is just being appointed or being used by the self, but he takes over as if he is the owner. This is how the perversion takes place, where reflected consciousness and the ego is considered as the pure consciousness itself. Again, we dealt with this in the Drik-Drishya Viveka with the analogy of fire and the iron fireball. And when the ego does so, it behaves in a manner totally different from what it was meant for by God. It develops its own identity and starts dictating its own terms on the body in an effort to get its desires fulfilled. This is where the lower the higher I is given up or ignored or forgotten, and the lower I, ahaṃkara, pervert ahaṃkara, the pure ahaṃkara in its perverted form, takes over. In this way, the ahaṃkara plays its illegitimate role, instructing the intellect that is contrary to the interests of the embodied soul. An instruction like keep smiling may suit the ego, but it gives a headache to the intellect to manage it practically. In practice, such an instruction can make one look idiotic. The second pair is the manas and the chitta, the mind and memory. The memory operates as the secretary to the mind. It stores all the information in proper files and sequence. When any information is needed by the mind, the chitta sets about its work of finding the right cabinet, opening the right file, and pulling out the requested information. It is also a very dynamic system. Old files that are no longer needed get deleted. The information is stored in conceptual groups. As concepts are reviewed and updated, so are the old files discarded and new files added. It is a wonder to see the chitta at work. If its boss, the mind, decides to change its mind, the chitta is expected to perform a miracle and reshuffle all the files within an instant. Like a dutiful secretary, it does so without complaint. So, comparing the chitta with that file analogy, old and irrelevant impressions in the chitta bank gets deleted or gets a backseat, if not completely deleted, and the newer impressions takes the front seat. Sometimes, however, an old reluctant file does get opened through carelessness. Then the behavior resulting from it will be along the old lines of thought by force of habit. It may not represent the new thought patterns being adopted. This is a challenge to the chitta. A chitta which is free from the biases of the other three departments, mind, intellect, and ego, can operate very efficiently. Such a condition is called chitta shuddhi or purity of mind. This condition, we shall see, is one of the most important requirements upon which the control and silencing of the mind depends. In fact, Swami gave us altogether a separate yoga, which he called as chitta shuddhi yoga. The four factors, manas, buddhi, ahaṃkara, and chitta, MBCA, constitute the inner equipment or antakarana, whose play through the organs of perception and actions makes it possible for a person to come in contact with the world around him. Therefore, as a contrast to the outer equipments, bahiskarana, these are the inner equipment, antahkarana. The self is compared to space, akasha. Space contains everything, clouds, smoke, or dust, but it remains fundamentally pure and untouched by them. Similarly, the self illuminates thoughts of joy or sorrow without being happy or sad itself. The I ahaṃkara is just a reflection. Most of our suffering comes from the ego claiming ownership of the mind's constant changes. By identifying these four functions, the seeker realizes, I am the witness, sakshi, who observes the mind. I am not the mind itself. This attunation was also dealt elaborately in the MBCA session. How to go beyond the misapprehension of the ahaṃkara assuming its overall supreme command, and to give away the ego and rest in our innate identity, which is the self or the pure ahaṃkara, without any coloring of the ego. Hari Om Tat Sat.